Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. We've got 6 games to go ahead and get through in this one, not as much as some other nights, but we are starting to hit a really critical point in the season. I feel like by the time Christmas Day rolls around, which is in 2 days from now, we really start to figure out what teams are made of. And there's one team in particular that I want to focus on this video that I really don't know what they're made of at this point. They don't really have an identity. They started off great and now they're really struggling. They haven't had their full team together for really any point consistently throughout this early going in the season, and it's starting to feel like they might have made some mistakes in the offseason that could really come back to haunt them over the rest of the year. But before we get into that, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and as always, we'd love to hear your takeaways down below in the comments. Also, no video on Christmas, but I will be back on the 26th, of course, breaking down the Christmas Day game, so you can look out for that video. So let's go ahead and kick things off with Suns versus Kings. This is a game that I was expecting to be really good. If you've watched a lot of these late night intra-division Pacific Division games, you know that they're usually bangers, especially when the Kings are involved. They play like the most entertaining games in the league, and plus both these teams are coming off pretty embarrassing losses. The Sacramento Kings had just gotten destroyed by the Celtics without Jason Tatum at home by 25 points, while meanwhile the Suns had just lost to the Blazers, continuing a skid that they've been on, including blowing a big lead in that game. So I thought that these two teams were going to come into this one looking to redeem themselves. Again, it's a Pacific Division game. The Kings are just really fun. You've got Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the other side. I was expecting some really fun hoops, and you know, one of those teams managed to redeem themselves and looked fun. It was the Sacramento Kings. The Suns did not look fun at all, and they got completely destroyed in this one. The Kings come out, win 120-105, went up by as much as 29 points in the third quarter, and the lead was double digits for the entire second half. Not a single second were the Suns able to bring it back within single digits. De'Aaron Fox tore Phoenix apart, 21 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks on 53% shooting. Keegan Murray, who has really been picking it up as of late, dropped 21 points, torching them. Harrison Barnes had 19. Sabonis had a 28, 11, 12 triple-double, really taking advantage of the lack of Jusuf Nurkic for the Suns in this game. It was a cakewalk for most of the night for the Kings. They really never seemed like they were in trouble. They've been stacking up wins recently, and they moved to 17-10, sitting at the 4 seed in a really tough Western Conference at the moment. As for the Suns, it's the latest installment in what's been an absolutely terrible stretch for the team. Back on November 26th, the Suns were looking great. They were 11-6 on a 7-game win streak, and they hadn't had Beal, Book, and KD all in the lineup for a single minute quite yet. Book and KD, meanwhile, while Bradley Beal is missing time, were putting up monster stat lines, some of the best stat lines of their careers, and both looking like MVP caliber players. It did seem like Beal was on a road to recovery. It just felt like a great start that the Suns could build off of. They were finding momentum, they were looking more cohesive on both sides of the ball, and it seemed like the crazy hectic offseason they had might have been just enough to get them to the spot where they wanted to be, where they look like potential championship contenders. I even made a video calling them dangerous, talking about how good Book and Kevin Durant had been, how when Beal comes back, it's only going to make things better, and ultimately how the Suns seemed to be putting things together, and it was only a matter of time before they rose towards the top of the Western Conference standings, like I predicted them to at the beginning of the season. But since that November 26th mark and that video, the Suns have gone 3-8. They've got losses to some really rough teams that they should definitely beat, like Toronto, Brooklyn in a game that featured the Big Three, the only full game with all 3 players. They lost the Portland Trailblazers last game, which is a terrible loss when you consider the big lead they had in the first half. The second half, they just fell apart. And on the season, they're 5-9 versus 500 or better teams. They played some tough teams over this stretch, like Denver and Sacramento, but those are teams this Suns team should be capable of beating. They don't need to beat them every night, but if they're going to be a championship contender, you can't just beat up on bottom feeders and lose to pretty much any competent team like the Suns have been doing over this entire season, but this stretch in particular. And on this stretch, they have the 16th ranked defense in the league and the 26th ranked offense. The offense was supposed to be their strength. The defense was the big weakness, but it's like, oh, they have Book, they have Kevin Durant, they added some shooters, they've got Bradley Beal. This team at the very least will be able to put up a bunch of points. All they've got to do is get enough stops to make things work with that high-powered offense. But recently, the offense has been pretty much non-existent. Even in games where Book and KD are playing, there have been a couple games here and there where one or both of them are out, but most games you have at least one of those guys. That should be enough to at least put up decent offensive performances. Never mind when you have both of them out there, it's inexcusable. Now, maybe some of these problems will alleviate themselves when Beal comes back to the lineup consistently, but at the same time, I don't know how often that's going to be. Up to this point, those 3 guys have all been active and available to play Book, KD, and Beal for 53 total minutes. They played one game together that they lost, and the very next game, Bradley Beal twisted his ankle 5 minutes into the game and is now out for a couple of weeks. We knew this was an injury-prone big three coming into the season. I made a video talking about how the Suns were a wild card in the West because talent-wise, they seem like they could be a championship contender, one of the top seeds, but because of some worries about cohesion, and mainly because all three guys are a major injury risk at this point in their careers, I didn't know where they're going to end up in the standings, and so far, they're currently sitting at the 10 seed at 500, in probably large part due to the fact that they just can't keep guys on the court. Booker's missed 10 games, Durant has missed 5, Beal's missed more than 20, even some of their role players like Eric Gordon has missed time, Josh Okogie's out for the moment, Grayson Allen has been beat up this season, pretty much everybody in this roster has missed some games here and there. They cannot build any type of cohesion or identity because they just don't have their players on the court, and hopefully that injury luck turns around, but it's starting to feel like it's kind of just a feature of this roster, the way that they built it, and relying on 3 pretty injury-prone stars to lead the charge. They just don't have much depth, so they can't afford these big-time injuries, especially to their star players, which, while we're on the topic of depth, I thought the Suns did a pretty good job using limited resources to bring in role players that could be somewhat consistent, or at least just more reliable than the guys we saw last year in the playoffs against the Denver Nuggets, where they really just did not get any production outside Book and Kevin Durant. But so far this season, a number of their depth additions have been pretty disappointing. I thought Yuta Watanabe could come in as a shooter that's played with Kevin Durant before and really benefit from playing alongside these Suns stars, and instead, he's shooting just 33% from deep when that's pretty much his whole thing. I was a huge fan of the Keita Bates-Diop signing. He was so good last year in San Antonio, shooting like 38% from 3, playing great defense. I thought he would be a starter for them at some point during the season. That's how much I believed in the signing, but so far, he's been bad. He's shooting around, I think, 30% from 3. That's not at all reliable. Drew Eubanks has been bad overall. He doesn't really space the floor, and the defense really doesn't exist. Eric Gordon has stepped up offensively for the Suns. Actually, today, according to Chris Haynes, he wants even a bigger role than he's already had this season, which has been substantial because of the injuries, but while he's doing decent things offensively, there's pretty much nothing defensively. There's no rebounding. If he's not hitting his shots, Eric Gordon is a liability out there. You've also got a guy like Josh Okogie, who's a great defender, but doesn't bring much to the table offensively. This team just doesn't have many players who are effective on both sides of the ball, which is really unfortunate because that was the whole point of a number of these signings. They tried to find guys who were on cheap contracts that they could bring in, get some great role player value out of them. You just got to defend a little bit, knock down your open threes, and you can be really good on this team, but not a lot of those guys are knocking down threes, open, contested, whatever. They're just not hitting those shots. The defense really isn't there. This team just doesn't have an identity on either side of the ball. They're pretty average, pretty much all around. Only 4 guys in this roster at the moment are shooting above 34% from deep. 3 of them are their stars, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and the other 2 are Eric Gordon and Grayson Allen. Everybody else is 34% or lower. Over the stretch that the Suns are on right now, they've shot the second least threes in the league, and they're shooting the worst percentage in the league on those deep attempts. So they're not shooting a lot of threes, they're not hitting pretty much any of them, which makes it incredibly hard to win in today's NBA. In my opinion, this is somewhat a result of the very stagnant offense they've had at times, which, again, you've got Devin Booker, you've got Kevin Durant. How is this offense looking as stagnant as it does? Maybe it's because they do need a floor general. Kevin Durant has done a solid job as a wing creator, but he's putting up a lot of turnovers to his assists. Devin Booker's got a pretty good assist to turnover ratio. Like, he's been doing a fine job as a playmaker, but there also are a lot of times where I feel like Book misses some reads where he just holds the ball too long rather than trying to create offense, which it's hard to be the lead playmaker on a championship caliber team. I think the Suns might have to go out there and find somebody to trade for to fill that role. That was one of the concerns with the Bradley Beal acquisition, was that they didn't really have a point guard at that point. You know, Book, Beal, and Durant were all above average playmakers for their positions, but they didn't have that one guy to go ahead and slow things down, set up the offense like they did in the past with a Chris Paul. I think that's part of the reason why the offense has been so rough. It's been stagnant, why they're not shooting threes, they're not knocking down threes. I feel like if they got some type of facilitator, the game would open up a lot, but not having a lot of resources makes it very difficult to find that type of player. They're not great offensively, they're pretty bad defensively, they turn the ball over a lot, they don't shoot a lot of threes, they don't hit a lot of threes, their players are hardly in the rotation consistently. This team has just been a mess and looked absolutely lost since that great stretch that they had. They've looked like a completely different team. One of the most disappointing teams over this past month or so in the entire association. And I'm not writing them off by any means. When you have Book, you have Kevin Durant, this team could still do great things. Maybe it just takes Bradley Beal getting healthy to turn this thing around. You get everybody back consistently, you build some chemistry. It might just take time to really find your footing, but there's a chance that when Bradley Beal comes back, it doesn't fix things. They still don't really have a facilitator. He's not going to fix the defense. He by himself is not going to fix the three-point shooting. Maybe they just need some regression in their favor. I don't know what it is, but at the moment, the Phoenix Suns don't look anything like the championship contender I thought they were going to be this season. Again, might just take time, but for the moment, they might have to make some type of moves or just try something new, because what they're doing right now isn't working. Let's go ahead now and move on to the rest of the games. First, you've got the Miami Heat defeating the Atlanta Hawks 122-113. No Jimmy Butler in this game, but the Heat still get things done at home. Tyler Hero has a 30-piece. Bam Adebayo puts up 18, 11, and 6. Not great shooting. Still hasn't found the rhythm he had pre-injury quite yet. And Duncan Robinson put up 27. I've been very impressed by the Miami Heat so far this season. A video is probably coming about them soon, because they're sitting at 17-12 despite, I think, the most injuries in the league. I saw some graphic recently that I think said that they were missing the most contributors due to injuries this season, but they've managed to pull things together, mainly because Eric Spoelstra is an unbelievable coach, but also because they're deeper than I was expecting. A lot of guys are contributing, whether it's Jaime Jaquez, it's Josh Richardson, it's Haywood Highsmith, Caleb Martin. They've just got a lot of depth, really solid role players across the roster that complement the stars and are really able to step up consistently in the absence of those guys. As for the Hawks, they get another great Trae Young game that they waste. 30 points, 13 assists, and 3 boards from Trae. Still lose. You got 24, 8, and 6 from DeJounte, 23, 2, and 5 from Bogdan. They were missing some guys, but at some point the Hawks have to find a way to put together wins. Jalen Johnson is hopefully going to come back soon, according to some report. I think it's Tuesdays when he's supposed to be back. Hopefully that helps them turn things around, because so far they have looked terrible. Last game I want to go into in depth is Denver versus Brooklyn. Jokic leads away with 31, 11, and 7 as the Nuggets defeat the Nets 122-117. Jamal Murray also puts up a great game, 32 points, 5 boards, and 9 assists, torching anybody that Brooklyn put in front of him. AG had 18. The Nuggets have been impressive this season. They're putting together a lot of wins despite dealing with injuries to Jamal Murray, some of their depth pieces, Jokic struggling a little bit, a lot of shooting slumps. The Nuggets still find ways to win consistently. They are one of the best teams in the Western Conference. It doesn't really matter who's out there on the court for them. Meanwhile, for the Nets, after starting off the season playing pretty well, they've been struggling a little bit as of late, and a big part of that has been the struggles of Mikal Bridges. He had 14 points in this one, 3 rebounds and 6 assists on 7 of 16 shooting. Currently in one of the toughest shooting stretches of his career, especially in his time as a Brooklyn Net, where they consistently look to him as this one option. Hasn't been able to put it together recently. I think he'll figure things out because he's really good, but they do play the Pistons twice in a row, once tonight and once in a couple of days, I believe Tuesday after Christmas, which is a little bit scary when their best player is struggling like this. They need to be careful because the Pistons could potentially catch them off guard and finally get a win, especially because one of those games is in Detroit. Maybe this is when the Pistons finally figure things out, although I've said that in the past, and consistently they find ways to lose. Wrapping up the rest of the games, the Rockets destroy the Mavericks, led primarily by Alperen Şengün with a great 22, 15, and 3 performance in just 25 minutes. Rockets getting things done. The Warriors blow out the Wizards, extending their win streak, led by Curry's 30 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists, and 20 plus points from Jonathan Kuminga and Klay Thompson. The youth movement is really doing wonders over there, and the Sixers defeat the Raptors with Maxey, Embiid, and Tobias Harris all scoring 30 plus points. With all that being said, those are my thoughts on the games from tonight. Let me know down below in the comments what your takeaways were, and let me know what you think about this Phoenix Suns team. Did they make a mistake trading for Bradley Beal? Should they go ahead and try and move on from him, bring in a point guard? Do they need to just wait for guys to get healthy and see what they look like with the full roster before making moves? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and where do you think they end up in the standings? Because currently, they're on the verge of being a lottery team at the moment. I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe like I mentioned earlier if you did enjoy the video. And as always, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Happy holidays to all you out there. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see you later. Real one, say back.